I'm a historian and I think history, and I research this trilogy. It's a trilogy, you probably know that. The second one's out in England, the third one comes out in October, so I've done them all. Here the second one comes out beginning July, the third one in January, but these things change a little bit. I was always rather disapproving of historical novels. And I have a great friend who is a very known historical novelist called Philippa Gregory. And you may know her other Boleyn Girl, or a number of her books have been made films. And she's always been after me to write historical novels. No, I stick to the truth. And then I get the professor emeritus of this history or that history to check them, who write rubbish in the margin or wrong source and this sort of thing. And I wasn't going to do that at all, no. And then, when I'm researching Agnès Sorel, who's the subject of the second volume, I'm sitting at a lunch next to a very famous French pathologist who asked me what I was working on. I told him. He said, "Oh, you know she was poisoned." I said, "Oh, don't be silly, she wasn't poisoned. She died after a terrible childbirth. There was no doubt she was going to die. She did a dreadful journey, and then she had this stillborn 7-month fetus, and there was no way she was going to survive. She looked terrible, she was ill. She was ill throughout the pregnancy, you know." No, he said, no, I got hold of some of her hair. And she was full of poison, had enough poison to kill a horse. Well, of course, this is the 15th century and everybody was more or less poisoned then. You know, that was, I mean, you were either killed in battle or skewered with a sword, but otherwise you were poisoned. And I said, "You can't do this to me." And then it was in all the French papers, the proof. So what do I do? What do I write at the end of a biography? P.S. Now we know she was poisoned. Huh? Who did it? How do I know 550 years later? So I go through all the research again, I go through all the people again, I make lists of who had the opportunity, who had the motive, who had something to gain, you know, and so I worked through all of that, and there were 5 or 6 likely candidates, and I don't know which one it was, but I chose the one that you were the least likely one for you, the reader, and there's a scenario. There's a potential scenario, but there are about 5 or 6 potential scenarios, but I chose this one. So all I did in the 3 books, I didn't change any facts. Everybody who lived, everybody who died, every child was born, every incident happened. But I invented dialogue, dress, detail. I mean, I know what they wore. I didn't know what they were wearing that day. I know what jewelry they had, what they ate, what flowers, but I don't know what it was on the table that day. The only thing I really invented was the conversation in the last 3 pages of the 3rd book. No, I invented all the conversations, but the content of the conversation. And then the epilogue tells you that it is possible because the things that were suggested happened. So this person could have poisoned her because the person who said she could have done it, he could have done it, she could have, said, "Well, in the next reign, if the following things happen, I think you can be sure it was this one." Epilogue, next reign, the following things happened. So it's a scenario. I mean, when you've got these history books contain lots of little side stories, and it's not just the one love story. It's not just there's a bit of this, there's a bit of this, and the mother does that, and the uncle does that. You know, so there are too many little anecdotal stories which I find fascinating that I don't want left out. And with the television series, you've just got more scope for that. You know?